I get to Vach Rabbi Say, we're starting a brand new topic within the topic that we were in the middle of, and that was we're holding in the middle of the Heilige Bishul. Until now, we have been discussing the Da'oraisas of Bishul. We're now going to move on to the D'Rabbanans, maybe even more negay than the Da'oraisas, and not just into Rabbanon. There are certain halachas, which maybe we'll talk a little bit about, that if you do them b'di'eved, there are certain shailas, are you allowed to have hana from that which you did? Ma'aseh Shabbos, the sugya Ma'aseh Shabbos, the beginning of Shein Yitches, discussed it by Riches. If a person is allowed to have hana from a malacha that was performed, there's generally enough kamina between a da'oraisa and a d'Rabbanan. Obviously, a da'oraisa being Muhammad, a d'Rabbanan being a little bit less, whatever that means. The question over here is, when we're dealing with the d'Rabbanans of Bishul, however, we're actually sometimes even more machmir than a regular d'Rabbanan. The reason for that is Chazal tell us we're worried that because these are so nogeya, these are things that everyone does. That I don't believe there's a normal from Yid that eats food on Shabbos that's not subject to one of the following shilas that we're going to be discussing today and in future days as well, with the Gabi the halachas of the D'Rabbanans of Bishul. And therefore it's so nogeya, it's so important for a person to have hot food. Therefore a person may come to do this. That's why Chazal, so to speak, made it even worse when a person did these halachas b'di'eved. That's why it's so important for a person to know these halachas. If you remember, all the way back at the beginning, we discussed the shaila of a group of guys that were on a beach for Shabbos Kodesh, and their shaila was what the shaila that we're going to deal with right now. And that was, they want to go and heat up the chicken soup, so they build themselves a little bonfire, a little pile of wood, whatever it was. They lit it on fire, they put the pot on top of it, and the shaila is mutter asa and how to deal with it in that exact situation. So that was the shaila. It wasn't so negated to Bishul, it was more negated to what we're discussing today. And that is as follows. There is a few halachas that we have to get to. 3 be'etzem. Number 1, Shehiya, which is leaving items of food on a fire before Shabbos. Number 2, Chazara, returning something to the fire on Shabbos, even if it was placed before Shabbos. You take the children off the fire, off the hot plate, all of these things to put it back on, to return something. And of course, we have to discuss the shaila batmana, which is insulating, which is very important. So those are the 3 D'Rabbanans that come from the D'Oraisa of Bishul. Now, we know there's be'ezra machlokes in Gemara and Shabbos, Yudches, machlokes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. What is the din of doing a malacha before Shabbos and let it happen on Shabbos? Right? So for example, a water sprinkler system, almost what the Gemara is talking about. Could you set it up before Shabbos that the water is going to go on Shabbos and therefore will water your plants, which we know watering the plants obviously on Shabbos Kodesh is asa, but I did it all the actions before Shabbos. So l'chayritz hamachlokas Beis Shammai Beis Hillel, which we're not going to go into now. Now we know that by many things we do this. We have a time switch, for example, that switches on the lights. We have a time switch that switches on the air conditioning, and we have many such things that we set up before Shabbos that will go on Shabbos. And generally speaking, with some exceptions, there's no problem with that. As long as all the actions were done before Shabbos, there's no problem that it goes on Shabbos. We're not worried that a person will think, oh my gosh, the air conditioning just went on. Who switched it on? Because it's a normal thing to have time switches. If it's a normal thing to have a time switch, we're not choishish. There are certain exceptions, av shemilsa, things that are very loud, that make a lot of noise. They're taka we're choishish, that maybe someone will assume differently, but that we're not going to talk about this moment of time. What we're going to discuss is a very unique halacha, and that is as follows. And the Mishnah Berurah brings this down in the beginning of Reish and Gimel Sif Aleph. It's a Gemara in Shabbos Lamed Vav, very important Rambam in Hilchos Shabbos, that says like this: what happens if you take a pot of food on Wednesday, on Tuesday, on Monday, today, doesn't make enough gemina, Sunday morning, and you put on this pot of food onto the uncovered fire and it's completely not cooked? What is the din? If Shabbos comes in, whenever that may be, and the pot of food is still not cooked, so the halacha is that it's asa. What does that mean? I did it on Sunday, I did it on Wednesday, I did it on Friday morning, early morning. That's nothing to do with me. I put it on and I left. The answer is, says the Gemara, and this is a very complicated Gemara. Anyone that learned this sugi in the Gemara, and you learn it even in Shulchan Aruch in the beginning of Reish Gimel, it's a gavaldige sugya, but it's a little bit hard. And that is like this: Chazal will choishish shema yichate. That means, if you're going to come to your pot on Shabbos and see Friday night, oy vay, it's not cooked. So what are you going to do? Shema Yechata. Maybe what? What's Shema Yechata? Hello? Anybody there today? Do what? Oh! Comes along Ben, Rabbi Ben, and he said, what do you mean? Shem Yechad, I'm going to stoke the coals. There's coals over there. How did they cook in the olden days? They had coals, and if the coals weren't hot, like you have in a barbecue, you give it a shake, or you fan it, you do something to cause it to reignite, to get more geschmack, to get, starker hot or whatever. We're worried on Shabbos that you're going to do that. What's the problem if you do that? Mabaya? Hello? Anybody? Very good. To be maveh, avora. You're making a fire on Shabbos Kodesh, Avadas Asa. So therefore, it's interesting. We're dealing with a Gzeira Midrabanon, not really, also because of Bishul, but Shema Yechata being you're going to stoke the coals, and through stoking the coals, you're going to go and do a problem of making fire, which is obviously one of the Lamates Malachas, Pasuk Mefurish in the Torah, and therefore that's why it's a problem. So it means like this, a very unique halacha. This halacha already starts on Erev Shabbos. All the other halachas that we're going to discuss, maybe except for Hatmana, is going to be generally on Shabbos. Here we have a Shaila of Hilchos Shabbos on Erev Shabbos, and I say Erev Shabbos, it could mean even 3, 4, 5 days before Shabbos Kodesh. A person has to be careful not to do that. Everyone knows the famous Maisa, the Heilige Chavetz Chaim Schus and Yugen Alayni. Right? You know the Maisa, right? Everyone knows the Maisa. The Chavetz Chaim was traveling from place to place. As he used to do, he used to sell his Sforim. It wasn't like it is nowadays where everything's all over the place and there were Sforim shops and everything. So he used to go from place to place to sell his Sforim. People didn't necessarily know who he was, right? Obviously you see a big tzaddik, but they didn't know his Sforim to be what they are today. And he used to go around selling them, and he went to a certain place and they heard that he was the Hilchos Shabbos, unbelievable. So they came over to him and they said, Rebbe, you got to help us. You got to help us. There's a Yid, unfortunately, in this town that has a metal melting a huge factory. Listen to this. It takes 3 days to get the fire going to the exact heat that he needs it to in order to melt the metal. It takes 3 days to lower the fire, to calm it down. You can't have it going the whole time, all day, 24/7. It doesn't work. You have to let it cool down a bit. And it takes 3 days to cool it down. And it takes 1 day to sort of in between. So if you work out the cheshbon, there are only 7 days in the week. It takes 3 days to get the fire to the right time. 1 day to actually get it to where it needs to be to melt the metal, and 3 days to get it down again. What do you want the guy to do? He's not keeping Shabbos. Rebbe, maybe you can help him and give him some advice of what he can do to his factory to make sure that he keeps Shabbos. The Chavetz Chaim smiled. He said, what do you want from me? The guy knows how to make metal better than I do. Well, I'm going to give him advice how to run his business. What I can do is give him the Kedusha Shabbos, give him what it means, a Shabbos Kodesh, what it means to have a Shabbos, to spend time in the Rebbeinu Shalom, what it means to spend time in davening, in eating, Ba'onig Shabbos, Koved Shabbos, all these beautiful, wonderful things. Through that, maybe he'll how Gavaldik Shabbos Kodesh is, and he'll figure out a mahalach how to work his business slightly differently, that he'll be able to keep Shabbos. Al Kaponim, we're dealing with a shayla over here on Erev Shabbos Kodesh, which means that on Erev Shabbos you have to make sure that the food is somewhat cooked, which we will get to soon, Be'ez Hashem, before discussing that. So what does it mean? So Lamaisa we have like this. It's a very interesting thing. We have over here, first of all, anyone that learned Mishnah Berurah, first of all, those that you're learning Shehiya test, you know this. This is the other time where the Mishnah Berurah brings a Hakdama. In Reish Nun Gimel, you open up the Mishnah Berurah, and he brings, I'm going to give you a Hakdama into the Sugya, and the reason for that is because it's quite complicated. And therefore he gives you a Machlokes and explains it to you very simply. There's a Shitas Rabbanan, and there's a Shitas Chananya, which we will discuss maybe a little bit in more detail. Just very, very quickly, just to skim over it to understand. There's a Machlokes in the Gemara, Shitas Rabbanan and Shitas Chananya. Does the food have to be fully cooked when Shabbos comes in? Or is it enough that is Michael ben Derusai? Michael ben Derusai, we've explained previously in Hilchos Bishul, if you remember, we said it's either half cooked or a third cooked. The Mishnah Berurah over here in the beginning of 7 Reish Nun Gimel says it means a half cooked, which the Chazon Ish paskins a half, meaning in time. That means if it cooked a half time than it normally would, that's half cooked. According to the Chazon Ish, the Kaf HaChaim has a different mahalach, but according to the Chazon Ish says half cooked. Mishnah Berurah says b'shas adchak you could use a third. Or b'lemaisa lechatchila half cooked. That means lemaisa lefi shitas chachomim, it has to be fully cooked. Lefi shitas chananya, it has to be lefi shitas chananya, half cooked is fine. Okay? How do we paskin? So Lemaisa, it's interesting, the Be'alacha, I think it's the third Be'alacha in Simon Reish and Gimel, where the Be'alacha says that Lemaisa, the Olam are makel like Shitas Chananya, which is what the Ramah says, V'nogul Hokol Kesvara Achreina, is the Lashon HaRamah, which means that we're makel Keshitas Chananya, that as long as the food is a half cooked when Shabbos comes in, it's good. But Lemaisa, the Mishnah Berurah, the Be'alacha says, it's toiv, it means a rush, it's toiv for a person to have his food fully cooked when Shabbos comes in. Okay? Now, that means like this. Whenever you have a food, and it could be on a fire, or it could be in an oven. People don't chap that. An oven is an uncovered flame. People do this. Right? I've had tried this many times on an Erev Shabbos. It's right before Shabbos. Can I put a chicken into the oven so that it will cook? By the time Friday night comes, it will be cooked. But when Shabbos enters, it's not fully cooked. What's the din? It's an uncovered flame. So the halacha is like this. Let's make it very, very simple. It's okay if it's a half cooked. As long as it's a half cooked when Shabbos comes in, you're good. If it's under half cooked, b'shas atchak a third, but even under that, you can't leave it in an uncovered flame. And it will actually become osur on Shabbos Kodesh. Because when Shabbos came in, this item was not even a third cooked. Right? Half cooked is even better, but the Mishnah Berurah says it's better toiv for a person to have his food fully cooked when Shabbos comes in. Same thing when you put a chicken soup on the fire. Again, you put it on the fire, you put on the chicken soup before Shabbos. It takes a couple of hours. So I'm saying about time I go to shul, I daven, I sing. If I bring a bit, we'll dance a bit, it'll be gishmak, come home, kiddush. Takes time. By the time I get the chicken soup, it will be cooked. The answer is when Shabbos came in, where was this? Was this cooked? How was it cooked? How much was it cooked? So that's really the shaila. Okay? I hope I'm not being complicated. I'm trying to make it as simple as possible, but it is a complicated halacha, but it's a very, very, very important one. So now let's move on, and we'll get to some of the shailas which are very negaya. If it's true that I cannot have a food on the fire that is uncovered, whether it be a flame, whether it be an oven, and it has to be fully cooked, or at least half a cooked when Shabbos comes in, is there an eitzah? What about putting a chulent on a crock pot, for example, completely raw when Shabbos comes in? Very negaya. People do this. You get to the apartment, you're going away for Shabbos, right? And people do these things, right? They go away for Shabbos sometimes, right? They go to their place. By the time they sort everything out, it's mamash almost Erev Shabbos, and then they want to put the chulent on. You'll put the chulent on. Say this, mamash Shabbos is in 10 minutes. Say that before Shabbos. Don't worry, I'm stepping back. I'm finished when Shabbos comes in. Say that, but the food is not cooked. If it's an uncovered flame, you cannot have it on Erev Shabbos. Even though I did nothing on Shabbos Kodesh, and by the time Shabbos comes in, it will be cooked. It doesn't make a difference. Why? Because Erev Shabbos, it has to be at least lechatchila, fully cooked. Lower madrega under that, half a cooked, b'shas atchak, a third cooked. And again, a third and a half is generally, according to the Chazon Ish, worked out by time. David, are you with me? Kavaldik. Let's move on. So what's the eitzah? What do I do? What do I do if I have a chicken in the oven, or a chulent on the crock pot on Erev Shabbos, and it's not a half cooked? I want to be loyal to lechatchila. I don't want to be yotze b'diavad. So what do I do? Zug that very it's simple. Tashbeit brings it. The Magen Avraham, the Mishnah Berurah, halacha l'maisa, and that is something what we call a blech. A blech. Chazon Ish could be in Bnei Brak. They didn't hold of these things. We'll talk about that maybe when we get there. But on Kaponim over here in Yerushalayim and the rest of the world, there's something called a blech. What is a blech? But etzem, the blech is not mentioned in the Gemara. What is mentioned in the Gemara is something called goruf v'kotum. Again, Rabbi say, I'm taking a sugya that is a hugely hard sugya in the Gemara in Shabbos and condensing it down for a few minutes. Goruf v'kotum means literally one or the other, which is either you took the coals and you raked them out, so there are no more coals in the oven. If there are no more coals in the oven, then what? We're not choshesh anything. The whole chashash is what? Shema yechata. Then I'm going to go and stoke the coals. Memela, don't put the food on the uncovered flame before Shabbos. But in a case where there are no coals, right, Zechariah, then there's no chashash, right? Hu hadin, zuk de gemara. If you take sand and you sprinkle sand over the coals, everybody knows what happens when you sprinkle sand on the coals. Zevi, what happens? The coals go out, right? Or at least they diminish in there. There's nothing much you could do with them. They may retain a bit of their heat for a bit. They're not going to go cold if you don't put that much on, but they're not. You can't really reignite them after that. Which means, goruf v'kotum means either you rake them out or you cover them with sand. The chashash of stoking the coals is no longer there. Therefore, the Gemara tells us if you do one or the other, there's no problem. You're allowed to leave the food on however you want. Translate that to nowadays, what would that be? That would be called a blech. That means if a person takes a blech and he covers over the fire, he's basically done goruf v'kotum. He's basically covered the fire, he's covered the Mokum Ha'esh, giving him a reminder not to do anything. Mimela, we're not worried that a person's going to do Shem Yechata, and therefore you would be allowed to put a food on any level of cooked process in that situation on a blech.
Does that mean you have to cover the
We'll get to that. Okay? By the way, they called me once in my hotel. What's halacha? You know, you have these containers they put tea lights in. You put tea lights in. You ever seen them? It's served sometimes at restaurants. 2 little tea lights at the bottom. It keeps the food hot, whatever. Are you allowed? Does that need a blech? Like, well, what if you have that on Erev Shabbos in a hotel room, maybe in your house? Does that require a blech? Interesting one, no? Why not? What are you going to be machata? Like, what are you going to stoke? You can turn it higher. It's a tea light. There's not much you can do with it.
They don't adjust the blech either.
That's a different shayla. We'll talk about bismanenu, but I'm talking about that before we go into electricity. Simple. That's a real fire. That's what Chazal were talking about with a fire. 2 little tea lights under the thing over there. So I remember discussing it once with a Falk Zatzal, and he said to me, it really depends. If you've got enough there, or it's big enough of a flame to actually cook something, then you're going to need a blech. But if it's simply there and all it can do is keep it warm, then there's no problem whatsoever. Okay, so Rabbi Sai, the shayla is nowadays. Let's go to nowadays. You have a fire. Nowadays you have a gas stove, whatever, you turn it higher, you turn it lower. Does it require a blech if you put a chicken soup on Shabbos Kodesh or a chulun on it on Erev Shabbos? Does it require a blech? So there are 2 svaras to say that it does not require a blech. Well, Moshe talks about this in Shuvas, Chacham Avadin, Yechavadas, and others as well. Tzitz Eliezer. Does our gas require a blech or not? And the answer is, there are 2 reasons why it should not require a blech. Reason number 1 is very simple. What was the reason why there would be a chashash Shem Yechata? Why would a person stoke the coals of his fire under the food? Why would he do that? To help it cook more. Meaning, it's going down. You need to be mechazik it, right? Do our gases go down? Azaria, when you have your gas at home, you put it on. Does it go down? Does it slowly go down and down and down? You have to keep putting it on. You have to do that? In America. Yeah? Yida, what are you tying up? It doesn't go down, right? So maybe there's no chashash. The whole chashash is, if it goes down, it minimizes. We're worried that a person's going to be Shem Yechata, oivai, I need to mechazik it. Ours, it doesn't do that. Not Negeya. Maybe there's no Shem Yechata, there's no problem. I don't have to have a blech. That's reason number 1. Reason number two, what was the chashash? The chashash was Shema Yechata. There was never a chashash with Moshe that I'm going to go and get more wood from outside and bring it into the fire and put it on the fire. That not. They were worried that the Mokum Ha'esh itself I'm going to stoke. But if I'm not going to ever stoke the Mokum Ha'esh, there's no chashash. Nobody, as far as I know, would do anything with the Mokum of the Eish that he has in his house. You don't touch it. You don't poke it. What are you going to do with it? You have a knob, you have a switch on the side that goes higher and lower. But that's no shaychus. That's not what Chazal were talking about. That's almost like Zugra Moshe going out to take wood and putting it in your fire. Chazal were never choishish for that. That wasn't the Gzeira. Mimela, there's no Shem Yechata. We have 2 reasons to say that our stoves, our gas stoves, do not require a brach. I'll call upon him. That being the case, the Heilige Poskim say, Avadun Avadar, it does require a brech, and a blech will help you. Even if it wasn't exactly a Chazal Gzeira, nowadays that would be the Shem Yechata. So David has a Shaila, which we'll have to get to tomorrow. Do I have to cover the knobs then? If the Mokum where I turn it higher or lower, that switch, that's where it is, maybe I have to cover just that. And who said you have to cover the fire? Because the fire anyway I don't do anything with. Okay? So there's a lot of different Shailas that in Mitzvah Shem tomorrow we're going to get to, but that's the basic idea, that's the Hagdama into the Sugya. In Mitzvah Shem tomorrow we shall go through it in more detail. Have a wonderful day.